With AI, real stories from my classroom. Like David said, I am a special education teacher in Suffern Central School District. I teach a 12-1-1 classroom. That's 12 students, one teacher, and one teacher assistant. I'm also in multiple classrooms in my building supporting AI use in multiple curriculums. And so when I first came to AI, I instantly thought, how can this help my students get closer to the general curriculum? I got connected with ISTE and ASCD, and they pointed me to the transformational learning principles. The most impactful ones in my classroom for sure are igniting agency, ensuring the equity, and getting independence for my students, because my students struggle mightily. So they always ask for teacher help. They always ask for help on many assignments, and a lot of them don't know where to go when they need help. So giving them that agency, it was and empowering them through my teaching is one of the main principles that I've been working on for this year in particular. Of course, I'm a special education teacher, so universal design for learning is a huge part of my classroom. Creating rigorous goals, anticipating the barriers in my classroom, and trying to proactively design my instruction so that my students don't have as many barriers as they typically do to access the general curriculum. Creating engagement and representation, um, giving multiple means of action, expression. All this stuff is the things that I focus on when designing lessons and using AI in my classroom. So, how can AI help? AI and UDL kind of marry together. AI is a big universal design for learning tool that can be used in your classroom to help special education students, but not only special education students, students in the general classroom, students that just need that little bit of help in your classroom, even if they're in the general ed classroom. The other person I have been really focusing on is Dr. John Spencer. He talks about creating student agency through compliance, engagement, and empowerment, going from teacher centered to student centered and going back and forth there. So I highly suggest reading his book and his content on his blog if you're looking for more after this webinar. Blending artificial intelligence and human voice is another thing that I focus on in when designing lessons in my classroom. Human voice is really important because a lot of times, especially when it comes to writing, and I'm sure Jessica is going to talk about this, especially when it comes to writing, um, a lot of times my students struggle really, really mightily with writing. They struggle with, their grammar. They struggle with spelling. I'm not the only one that, even through COVID, we're hearing, general ed students are also struggling with these things, and that kind of limits their voice. It limits the voice that they have, that they could have within a classroom and eventually in life. So artificial intelligence, blending artificial intelligence with that human voice is something that could be done in a classroom. So how does, in practical ways, AI can support UDL and also any classroom? In my classroom, we have done a lot of things such as giving students context, background knowledge for a vocabulary or a book. We have a dictionary bot in my classroom that the students can go to when they don't know a word in a book and they can't find it within the context of the book. Front loading vocabulary, big one, translating text. AI does a great job translating text um, throughout all of your areas. So you can, as a teacher, you can translate text. And then also as a student, if you give a student a general ed textbook or a special or some kind of content, they can also translate the text on their own if they need to. Creating visual representation. Um, in one of the lessons I'm going to be talking about is we use Adobe Firefly in order to create descriptive writing assignments. So we had the students describe something that they would like to see in a visual representation. Then they put it in Adobe Firefly, and it was awesome to see the kids to, hey, to look at the picture and say, hey, that's not what I meant. I was like, okay, well, how can we change the wording within that text in order to get closer to what you were thinking of or what you imagine? Leveled readers is a big one. A pro tip, if you're going to use AI, put AI in a, I call it putting AI in a box. So using a program like Consensus that pulls only from peer reviewed sources can be really, really good so that you always get accurate information, especially when you're doing things like social studies or science, and you don't want the AI to hallucinate as much as it does. Um, Uploading a study guide, turning a rubric, and the last part is the most important part for me. When students say, I need help, I want to create the opportunity for the kids to be as most independent as possible. So when kids say, I need help, I want them to have that agency, have that independence to try to help themselves first instead of running to an adult first. So these are the two things I've been focusing on, especially this year, was focusing on using the AI, using the technology rooted in these concepts of student agency and student access towards the general ed curriculum. So what does this look like in my classroom? Well, the primary driver in my classroom is School AI when using it with students. Now, when I'm using it for myself, I use programs like Diffit. Sometimes I use Magic School. Sometimes I'll use ChatGPT. ChatGPT is blocked for students in my school district. However, I'm able to access it. So I can create content and create study guides and all of these things using ChatGPT, but the students are not able to use it. When the students use it, we give them those guardrails, and School AI is a big part of that. So this we read the book The Wild Robot, and at the end of The Wild Robot, I wanted my kids to take a test. So what I did was I created an assessment guide, a study guide for them. And then through that assessment study guide, I put the entire assessment study guide into School AI, and I started asking School AI questions so that the students could now use the AI bot in order to study for them. Now, funny story, um, when I first rolled this out to my students, it did give them the answers. So I actually had to go back, and it's so funny because it was like one of the worst times ever because I was so excited about this lesson that I invited my principal, my assistant principal, my superintendent, my superintendent for special services. Everybody was in my classroom, and it was not doing what I wanted to do. So I kind of fell flat on my face there. It's okay. So I learned from that. And at the end of my prompt, I said, do not give the students the answer. And it started to do what I wanted to do. School AI is great like that because you can change the prompt on the fly and then and then it will readjust itself. So that is a good part of that. So here are my students using School AI here. It is a single website that they go to with a space code and they can access it directly. The other thing, this is this descriptive writing. This is the descriptive writing lesson that we did. I had my students create a paragraph of something that they wanted to see. It had to be 5 sentences long, and which is a struggle for my students. And they put it into Adobe Firefly. The pictures that came out were not exactly what they wanted to do, so we had to revise all of these. And and if you've worked with students, revising is not their biggest strength. It's not even something that they really want to do or gravitate to. So what so this gave them the opportunity and the drive and the agency in order to want to revise because it was so engaging for them that they wanted to try to beat the system, try to get closer to the picture that they were thinking of. So it was a very engaging lesson for them. The Solar System Research Assistant. So we've created a bot in School AI that was a research assistant. So now I gave the prompt what what I wanted my students to know from a certain thing, and they were able to ask the bot questions, in order to get the information that they needed on the level that they needed it to. So this is a way a student could do research without going to Google and going to all different kinds of websites and all different kinds of things. They don't know if they're getting the right information. Maybe the text is too difficult for them. They need it to be read to them, whatever it may be. You can kind of streamline that and allow them to do research within their within School AI, and the AI will give them the answer that you need, or it can allude to the answers, and the students can figure it out. What makes School AI my favorite to give to students is that it is totally flexible. So here are my students using the Solar System Research Assistant here, and they're working on their stuff. So this is my favorite lesson, and I'm going to end with this lesson here. Uh, my Back in October 2023, I want to say, ChatGPT was just first coming out. ChatGPT was brand new. Nobody really knew what to do with it. It wasn't all that great, but I kind of just wanted to dive right into it. So, so this was before School AI. This was before Magic School existed. All those things. It was really just ChatGPT, and maybe Gemini, or actually it was Borad before, or whatever it was before that. So what I did was I wanted my kids to be able to write a story. One of the big things in my classroom that I talked about earlier was I wanted to give my kids student voice. A lot of these kids, they struggle very mightily with their writing. So they had never really written a story before. They had never written anything that was more than a page, more than a paragraph, more than a few sentences. So, but I know they have stories because I talk to them every day. They tell me stories all the time. They tell me what's going on in their lives. They tell me all these things. That is their voice. And to be able to write that down is a different skill. So, what we did was we read the book Sideways Stories from Wayside School. And I had the students write a chapter 31. Now, if you've read Sideways Stories from Wayside School, it's a very wacky book. Is the stories are crazy. They there's walls everywhere. There's the tower of the school is 30 stories up in the air. It's like, it's a fun, silly book for kids. Um, so I wanted them to write something that was fun and silly that they wanted to. So we taught them, we spent weeks talking about setting, we talked about characters, we talked about tone, we talked about genre. So we front loaded all of that work so that now when the kids are writing their AI prompt and having an AI prompt organizer, they could fill out and do all of those things. What I wanted them to do was incorporate a superpower. Now, I'm not sure I put the videos. Yes, I did. Okay, so I'm going to try to play this video um, right here. This is a story that a kid wrote, and his story was he wanted everything he ate to taste like pizza. So he was eating broccoli, tasted like pizza, the broccoli pizza wonderland. So that is the magic of AI because they were so enthralled and and you can see ChatGPT 3.5 there. So it was like before even any of these other awesome programs are. Um, he was so excited that he had his own story that it was he was able to read it to another student, be proud of it, and have that voice. And it was one of the big successes in my classroom. So now, fast forward to School AI time, and this is what's going to happen in 2 weeks. We adopted this lesson into School AI, and now I'm going to use School AI in order to write the prompt. And now I'm going to use School AI in order to do that. Before, I couldn't do that because ChatGPT was blocked for students. So I had to make sure that I did it on my account and make sure it's appropriate and all those things, because we know ChatGPT is can be not appropriate for kids because they can do nefarious things. What makes School AI great is that it has those kid guardrails. So so we put the prompt into School AI, and I'm going to be using this in 2 weeks, and I hope that it works. So this is kind of like the future of my classroom. So what I want to leave you with before I let Jessica go is what happens when students own their own learning. This is another big John Spencer thing. They find their own voice, they become self-directed, they grow empathetic, they gain that confidence, they gain that independence. And when you are using tools like this, when you're using assistive technology to kind of level the playing field for students like mine, they they get so excited. They feel that sense of accomplishment. They feel that sense of independence. They feel that sense of I can do, which is one of the most important things you can do as a special education teacher, but also as any kind of general education teacher or any kind of subject teacher. You want them to be their best selves. And an assistive technology like AI can really do that. So I have about 2 or 3 minutes. I know we're going to do Q&A in the end, but if you have any questions about anything that I've said, please make sure you put it into the chat, and I will do my best to answer them at the end after Jessica does her wonderful presentation.
All right. It's going to be hard to follow that, Matt. You are very innovative, and so I hope I can follow that. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen, and you guys yell at me if you can't see it. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, amazing. Yeah, it's good. Like I said, Matt's amazing. It's going to be hard to follow that. So he's probably on the higher end of the innovative side. I consider myself more of a middle ground person. I've already dipped my toes, right? I've experimented all of those things. And so now I'm kind of feel like I'm finally getting into the realm where, okay, now I feel confident and comfortable kind of bringing this to my students. And you guys, a lot of you guys are from the North, I think. I didn't see hardly anybody who was southern mid states. So you guys up north, I guess, are way ahead of the game as far as AI. Here in Tennessee, I think it's a little bit slower. Our district, I think, just recently this year has put in our AI policy and all of that, and we're finally getting in some trainings this summer. So hopefully it's not as slow going moving forward. But yeah, so this is kind of who I am. Matt is he's special education, elementary. I come from a secondary background, so I teach secondary English, mostly high school. Up until recently, I've been teaching ninth grade. I will not be teaching ninth grade next year, thank the Lord. But yeah, so I've been teaching ninth grade. Me and Matt met in our Generation AI cohort, so we are both with ISTE ASD as far as that. And so I try to still have high expectations for those ninth graders, even though they're just coming in, but allowing that creative side that AI brings and helping with that access and agency, like Matt was saying. We have a lot of the same talking points there. So I definitely think AI is important in ELA. Like if you're an ELA teacher, it's a lot of us, and I used to feel that way. A lot of us kind of see it as the enemy, especially with essays, and you're like, oh Lord, I have to put these through all kinds of AI checkers. I have to use lockdown browsers, and that is also the hard part of AI. But I do think it helps personalize that learning, and I mainly use it for the scaffolding and differentiation. And like I said, I am moving into that student agency piece here. So I'm not really fancy like Matt. I'm just going to talk about what I do, and hopefully that resonates with some people. So these are just some things that like I've noticed as far as my learners. I have a whole range of learners in ninth grade. They're coming to me sometimes not where they should be. So I do have students with disabilities. I do teach a lot of EL students, including sometimes newcomers, sometimes students who have been here in the States for only a few years. And then of course, I always have struggling readers. So these are some supports that I've used in my classroom to kind of help them along, build that, that base with them to help them out. Okay, so one of the main things, and Matt talked about this, is the writing. So I support writing a lot. Again, students, they have difficulty with writing, and so I try to provide all of that support that I can with that. So the main thing, which is the tiniest thing, and this is where I first started actually, is those sentence starters. So a lot of my students, they never know where to start. I give them a question and they kind of stare blankly at me and they don't know how to start, right? So kind of providing those sentence stems. I use these are not exclusive to ChatGPT and Magic School, but these are the main things that I have used. I'm a ChatGPT girl all the way. We have Google, but I don't think we have access to Gemini through that. And students have access to ChatGPT as well. The high school students do. So that's kind of mainly where the realm I'm in. So yeah, definitely providing those sentence frames. You could definitely, I have used whatever data I have on them. So if I know that they're a certain Lexile or their fluency score or they're reading at a whatever grade level, I'm going to put that into the prompt, right? It's all about the prompting. Okay. So sentence stems are a great start if you're kind of like dipping your toes and you're not sure where to start. I started there and I've never looked back. I also have started, I do teach ninth grade. And so, and I've been a little bit hesitant, started guiding students to kind of prompt for those themselves, right? So sometimes students do have the agency to ask me, can you provide me a sentence stem? And of course I will provide that to you. But again, kind of cutting out that middleman and giving them that agency would be, okay, you have the tools, start up ChatGPT or whatever AI we have here, and let's see what sentence starters you can get. But I think the thing we need to really instill in students, and especially in students that I have, is not just blatantly taking what ChatGPT says and running with it, right? We want to use those critical thinking skills, which I am going to get into. So that's one that I always use for writing for my struggling writers. I use Magic School as well. It's amazing. It has those sentence stems. So you can see me here, I'm prompting in ChatGPT, and it does give me like ChatGPT does. If you don't prompt it right, it will give you a whole slew of things. And so I kind of weed out what I don't want and what I do want and go from there. The next thing as far as writing is model paragraphs. So I always go with this example, not example, right? So they need to see what good writing looks like. They also need to see what bad writing might look like, right? So I definitely use these two tools, ChatGPT and Magic School. They both do great with example, non-example. But I also show them what is the difference, and I have them answer, and I ask them, what's the difference between this basic level and this advanced level, right? What do you notice? And so that's really helpful. But the trick here is I give them a different topic for those model paragraphs because sometimes they like to just copy the example. So kind of different topic, but showing what does this look like on different levels. Okay. So we're still on writing. Here's a big one because if you're an English teacher, you know we give crazy amount of essays. And there's not always the time in the day to really thoroughly grade and give feedback to those essays, right? So this is something that I have just this year kind of dipped my toe in. Again, next year, I think I'll definitely be gearing up to get on the level that Matt is on, where I am full-heartedly giving them the agency to do these things. I'm not there yet, but so I've tested out with my more mature classes, kind of having them put in their drafts into ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT to kind of give them suggestions for improvement. So not, hey, rewrite this to make it sound better, but really giving them those prompts to say, okay, here's what the end result should be. And what do you suggest? What improvements could I make? Right. So that's training students to write effective feedback prompts is really key, because like Matt said, sometimes it will just give them the answer and say, okay, you want me to rewrite your whole essay and make it better? Here you go, right? And they'll say, okay, great, thanks, and run with it, right? So we want to kind of train them and guide them on how to prompt correctly to get the feedback, not just an end result, right? And again, some of us have some fear with this, where AI is going to take over our jobs and things. I want to make it clear that never do I ever, and I wouldn't recommend just taking the AI feedback and saying, yep, sounds good. It's going to go in addition. I still do peer reviewing. I have them talk to me about what AI has told them, what they've changed, kind of reflecting on that. And so definitely I'm still in the process. I'm still grading essays, I promise you. But yeah, just kind of cutting out that middleman when it comes to certain things has been really great. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. So the next portion here that I'm going to talk about is the text analysis. So I talked about writing, and I do more than just what I listed in writing, but those are kind of the main things that I do to assist my students with their writing. And so now I'm going to get into, okay, what do I help them with as far as reading? How do I use AI in my classroom to help them really understand these difficult texts? Because if they're reading on a 6th grade level, right, they're in 9th grade, we use grade level content. Some of that can be maybe inaccessible, right? So I want to kind of guide them to be able to understand and access the content. So I have a hard time with my students when I tell them to annotate a text, in again, they're 9th graders, so they have not yet maybe been taught how to annotate. But annotation guides with ChatGPT, my bestie, have been really amazing, and because I always want them to focus on something. So I'm going to give them that right up front and say, these are things I want you to focus on. So differentiated annotation guides have been really helpful. I align those to the standards, to the objectives. So if I know I want to talk about tone, I want you to look at the tone in this. I might guide that in the annotation guide. It could also include those symbols or color coding, again, sentence stems. And then you can tailor that to reading levels, or you can make group annotation guides if you know you're intentionally grouping your students. Grouping those students and having them all have the same annotation guide is really great. So that kind of makes it more accessible. When I say, okay, annotate your text, there's not just a whole page highlighted, and we've all been there, I think, whole page highlighted and no notes, and you're asking them, why did you highlight that? And they're like, I don't know, it seemed important. And so this kind of eliminates that, where it's like, I know what I want you to focus on. So here's that guide for you. Level text, I think Matt did talk about level text. And so for me, again, my students are not always on grade level, but I do give them that grade level content. And so just to make that more accessible, typically it's going to be something that I'm using for background knowledge. So for example, we read a story, By the Waters of Babylon, and not a lot of my students know that Babylon is a place, or where Babylon is, or things like that, right? So I found this really great, I think it was maybe National Geographic or somewhere, really great informational text. And I said, okay, we're going to read this, and they're going to learn about Babylon and what that is and where it's at. And I found the text, and it was very, very high level vocabulary, right? So I said, okay, maybe I need to backtrack here, but I said, oh, wait, I actually use Diffit for that one, but Magic School and School AI are also have those text levelers. Those are things that I've used. There's probably a bunch more. And so I mainly use this level text to kind of build that background knowledge to get them where I want them to be before we start, a new lesson or a new unit. So that's been really great. And lastly, with that scaffolded reading is just vocabulary support. So again, some students have very high vocabulary, and some students, they struggle, right? So these are some things that I do in my classroom. I've used Diffit a lot in Magic School. I'm still new to School AI, and I think it just recently got approved for our district. But so using that to kind of build a list and, having those definitions, and then having, word banks, and even like providing those sentence stems and having them use it in sentences is really helpful, because once we can understand the vocabulary, you can now understand the whole story, right? So that's goes along with that reading support, with where they understand the vocabulary, and it's a lot easier to get through a story when we're not stopping and struggling with all these words. Okay, so the next thing, and this is kind of where I'm more so gearing toward next year, I think is going to be my huge focus with that student agency. Kind of my other focus is student engagement. A lot of times my students come in and they don't want to do anything. They don't want to read, especially. They don't want to learn about what I'm talking about. So just building in these things with AI to get students engaged, get that buy-in, and really get them interested, I think is helpful. So one way is using all of these great tools for innovative lessons. And my definition of innovative is probably not as high up as Matt's, but for me, it's innovative. So always making them standards based, but sometimes I have very off the wall ideas, and I'm like, I wonder if that would work, and I need to find a way to make it work, because that sounds really amazing and fun. Like, I want to do a scavenger hunt. I want to have text evidence scavenger hunt. We gave a test and they were low on the standard of text evidence. How can I make it fun and engaging? And ChatGPT gave it to me because I said, I want to do this, and they're like, hey, here's some ways you could do it. Or I think, I don't know what to call it, but I'm calling it a reverse whodunit, where I was like, I want to give them a bunch of answers, and all of them are incorrect except for one, and they have to figure out which answer is the correct and which are incorrect. And so they have to go on around and talk to each other. And how am I going to make that work? Right. And so I put it in the ChatGPT and I said, hey, I have this idea, and I prompted it and kept prompting it and kept prompting it until I got it to where I wanted it. But just getting that engagement with those different lessons. I think there are example lessons in the next slide of what I did. Yeah. So a really fun one that I did, I call it fun. My students probably hated it. We were in the middle of this testing season. So I just recently did it, not too long ago, in between testing days, and we have to still see these classes, and what are we going to do? Right. So I had them choose a character they wanted to focus on for the lesson. And okay, we're gonna prompt ChatGPT, and you're gonna have it give a scene with this character, right? And then I want you to look at the scene and say, okay, what is accurate about this character based on what I know, and what maybe could be fixed or revised, and what is inaccurate, right? And that was really great. And I gave my example. I'm an English teacher. I love Harry Potter. I gave my example of Draco Malfoy, and I prompted ChatGPT. And so we did a whole lesson on, okay, we need to really think critically about what is coming out of ChatGPT, and is it always accurate? And how can we fix it, right? How can we make this and make it better? And so that was a really great lesson, and I think they had fun with it. I had fun with it. So that was a nice little mini lesson as far as like AI, and they did use AI that day, and it was great. Another one is, maybe I didn't put it in here. Shoot. We were doing slam poetry, right? And I'm introducing them to slam poetry to get them interested in poetry in general. And they don't really know what slam poetry is. So I said, okay, go to ChatGPT, type in the prompt you want to write a slam poem over whatever topic you want. Some people chose basketball or Fortnite or something that they enjoyed. I prompted mine and I said, create a slam poem over reading. And it gave me a bunch of stanzas. And okay, so now what do you notice about this poem, right? What's the difference between this and maybe a traditional poem? Okay, so kind of like introducing, kind of hooking them in on what is this, what does it look like, and kind of building that background knowledge that way. That was really fun. Some of the slam poems were pretty good. So next I do use AI, ChatGPT again, for student choice. And so I do different projects, and I want them to to kind of be able to, again, have that agency where they're being able to show mastery in the ways that are comfortable to them. Most recently, we did a book project. Well, yeah, we did do a book project. We read a book, right? And so I assigned this book, and I can't remember the date, but I assigned it on this date, and it's this many pages, right? So I said, okay, we are about to be sophomores, and we need to know, how long do I have to be able to read this book? I'm not going to nag you as soon to be sophomores on, have you read your book? How many pages have you read? You need to do this, this, and this to show me that you've read. We're going to have a quiz. That's a lot of work. So, hey, prompt ChatGPT, the book is this pages. We have until May 22nd to read this book. How many pages should you read to be done with this book by May 22nd, right? Or, hey, we have this project, it's multiple steps. Maybe create a guide or a timeline for me on what steps I should start, when, to be able to have this project done on time, right? Because we all know students are not the best at time management, right? So that has been really interesting, kind of, again, giving them that agency and that choice of, okay, I need to kind of be responsible and rely less on my teacher and rely more on my resources, which I can create a nice little outline or a timeline on how well I get this done on time. And some students need it and some students don't, and that's okay. And I wrote down what Matt said because I took notes when he did that story. I said, oh, okay. I wrote that down. We do a lot of narrative writing and I was taking notes. But so I like the idea of generating those extensions of texts. We read a lot of texts, like the book we read left off on a cliffhanger, and they hated that. And that would have been a really good extension. I have done it in the past where they're creating their own extension, but I would love to see what ChatGPT says or whatever AI says. So that's an amazing resource to have, is kind of like getting them to see maybe what could happen next. Lastly on this is, it kind of goes into the student choice part, but these multimodal tasks, and I also wrote down, Matt, I wrote down where you talked about the generating a photo maybe, and I wrote that down for narrative writing. And so if they're describing a setting, if we want to type in maybe how they described it and then like see the outcome and are they happy with it? I like that. I wrote it down. But so using these like generators, so Canva has been updating a lot recently, and they can do a lot more than I recently thought. They have some AI image generators, right? So if you want an image, we have Suno, and I just recently played with Suno where you're creating music. So that could play in somehow if maybe I wanted to turn their poem into a song. We'll see. So I really love with the multimodal tasking that, again, that goes into student choice, student agency, and kind of gives them that buy-in and that ownership of their learning because they're able to show mastery in ways that they're comfortable with, right? So those are just a few ways that I've used it in my classroom. Definitely not on the level that Matt is, but just some final thoughts. I always want to emphasize that, and you guys probably know this, it's definitely not a replacement. I would never and have never just used anything ChatGPT has given me. I'm always going to use it as a tool. I definitely think it can be used for differentiation and things like that. And again, you don't need to be an expert. I definitely am not an expert on the level, of course, that maybe some people are, but just dipping your toes is one way to start, like kind of playing around with prompting, I think can be really helpful. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, can put them in the chat.